Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Geri Criss, who's going to give us a live testimony this morning. Thanks, Geri.
Good morning. My name is Geri Criss, and I'm married to David Criss. We've been married for 34 years. And I get to tell you a little bit about myself this morning and a little bit about Discipleship Pathway. So I was invited to church when I was 12 years old, and I was in the 6th grade. I learned about Jesus, and I soon made the decision to follow him. And I stayed at that church for a little while, but I was not from a Christian home. In fact, my parents were both functioning alcoholics. I didn't have teaching or support at home, and I didn't grow any strong roots, like the story in Mark chapter 4, where Jesus told the parable of the sower. And if you don't know that story, go read it. As I grew up, I started to grow apart from God, and I started to walk away. But as you might know, he doesn't walk away from us. He was right beside me all of the way, and as I look back, I can see him right next to me, even as I rebelled against him, and I did what I knew was wrong. I made all the mistakes. I made teenage mistakes. I made the young adult mistakes. I was totally following the world. And then I had what I call a God moment. The night that my son was born, after a pretty long labor and delivery, I was alone in the room. Everyone had gone home to sleep, and it was just my son and I. And the lights were dim, and I looked around that room, and all of a sudden, we weren't alone in that room. There were 3 of us. The Holy Spirit was in that room with me, and I felt his presence. There were 3 of us in that room. And even though I had made mistake after mistake after mistake, knowing it, God still gave me this precious little gift. And I told God that night, I'm coming back. And I did. By the grace of God, I wound up back in that same church that I had been in, but this time I was in my mid-20s. I stayed there for over 20 years, and I built a church family there. I grew in my relationship with God, and I belonged to a small group, and I made lifelong friendships. Due to family needs, we moved away from the Portland area down to the valley, and a fun fact about me, until I was 51 years old, I never moved farther than 10 miles away from where I grew up. I began attending Grace immediately upon moving to the area. I met a few individuals who made me feel like this would be my new church home. And I plugged into a few Bible studies, and I began making friends. But the real excitement came when I heard about a new opportunity being presented called Discipleship Pathway. I had gone through a series of classes called 101, 201, etc. at my previous church, but these classes sounded different. They sounded more like they would be interactive and growth-based. It sounded like a great place to get plugged in because I wanted to grow in my walk with the Lord. I started Discipleship Pathway 101 in September, and I did 201 in March. The capstone experience was a highlight experience for me. That was the weekend where we went down to the beach and we had time away. We were learning, we were practicing spiritual disciplines, we were growing closer to the Lord, and Pastor John got to preach on the beach. So all of that to say, I've been a Christian for a while, and one of the questions that comes up is, why would a mature Christian want to take a Discipleship Pathway 101 class? Well, one reason might be to gain insight into how to explain these fundamental topics to a non-believer. Another reason is that I learned so many new things in 101 that I didn't go to a Christian school, and I haven't had those opportunities that some have had to dig deep. Even if you have, God can still illuminate new and exciting treasures in 101 for you. We got to see how we fit into God's plan and that we're meant to be active participants in that plan. We've had an opportunity to explore and talk about 2 individual topics, and specifically 2 that stood out for me were the reliability of the Bible and the Bible as one big story. We talked about these not only within our class, but with our mentors. We've developed strong relationships within our cohort and with our mentors, and I personally have 2 amazing mentors, Colleen Johnson and Nancy Wentworth. I have nothing but great things to say about the mentoring aspect of Pathways. I'm excited to start 301 in September and be challenged even more. Please be praying about your part in Discipleship Pathway, whether as a participant or as a mentor. There's truly something for everyone as we try to be disciples who make disciples. And please be praying for Discipleship Pathway here at Grace and for Pastor John and Geri as they lead the group. Thank you so much for listening.